Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Power of Your Mind podcast. You're listening to episode number 188. I'm Victoria Gallagher, Law of Attraction hypnotist and #1 best-selling author. Practical Law of Attraction: align yourself with the manifesting conditions and successfully attract your desires. And I'm also the founder of HipTalk.com and HypnoCloud apps, which gives you access to over 500 hypnosis recordings right in the palm of your hand. So be sure to download that app from the app stores today. And today I have a very special guest with me, Penny Zenker. Penny Zenker is a Focusologist, an international speaker, business strategy coach, and a best-selling author. Before her 31st birthday, Penny founded, developed, and sold her first multi-million-dollar business while living in Zurich, Switzerland, and later at the world's fourth largest market research company. She managed business unit turnarounds and was a Tony Robbins business coach, helping entrepreneurs around the world to double their businesses. Penny is one of America's leading experts in psychology of productivity to eliminate distraction, perfectionism, and self-sabotage, and to maximize results in every area of your life. In Penny's book, The Productivity Zone, was an instant Amazon bestseller, and her TEDX, The Energy of Thought, has gained attention around the world. Her engaging, inspiring, interactive talks teach people to think and act more strategically. Penny's been featured on NBC News, Forbes, Inc., ESPN, and Wharton Business Radio, among others. And she can be found on pennyzenker360.com. And today, Penny is going to be sharing some of her insights on how to own your focus. So welcome to the show, Penny.
Hi, Victoria. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. I love everything I just talked about. I love everything that we're going to be talking about. And, it was so fun hanging out on your show the other day. And so I'm just glad to be able to, kind of flip it and talk about you and really find out all about, this pesky distraction that we get into and how to focus and be more productive. And you've just done some incredible things, having a multi-million-dollar business and selling that, and, working as a Tony Robbins coach. And so, you've definitely got some unique experience in this game. And so I'm all about what you're about here. So I'm really excited to dive in.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I've had a lot of really great experience. And that means, as we know, a lot of failures and hard knocks and learning things the hard way sometimes. And so I'm happy to share what I've learned.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think that might be a really good place just to start is like, what were some of those failures, or what was one of the biggest blunders? That's the one that maybe was the turning point for you that really helped you to figure all this out and figure out the need to let go of these distractions and focus more?
Yeah, well, let me just say that it's a practice. I'm still practicing it. That's why I call myself a focusologist, because it's someone who practices being able to control and direct their focus. That's the simple definition. I'll maybe go into the deeper one later, but so I'm still working on it. But the biggest turning point for me was back when I was running my technology business, or I should really say it was running me. It's one of those things where be careful what you wish for. Super successful business, things were growing at a speed that I could barely keep up. New employees starting, new clients onboarding, moving offices and constantly, growing. And it looked great from the outside, but the problem is it was killing me. This is a mistake that I think most entrepreneurs and most people can relate to is that we think that if we just throw more hours at it, that we're going to fix the problem. If I just worked a couple more hours, I could get on top of this, and I'll just work some more, and I'll just work harder. I'll just work longer. Right. And yeah, you're laughing because it's like, what makes us think that? Like, that is so wrong. All it does is burn ourselves out and burn everyone else out around us. Because I was exhausted. I was grumpy. I was making mistakes. I was blaming other people. And let's just say it didn't bring out the best in me, and it didn't bring out the best in my team either. So, my story goes like this: is I decided, well, I'm just going to avoid it, and I'm going to say, maybe I'm not cut out for this. So I thought, okay, I'm going to sell my business. I had an offer and an opportunity, and I thought, that's it. I'm going to do that because maybe I'm just not cut out to be an entrepreneur. So I'll go get a 9-to-5 job somewhere.
Really? Wow.
I did. Yeah, I really did. And I figured, it was overwhelming me. And I thought that was my only way out. Right. And a lot of times we do that. We hide from it. We run from it. We bury it. Whatever we can do to avoid taking ownership of it and actually stepping back and looking at it for what it is. So I wasn't ready to do that. I took this position as the chief technology officer of a large market research company. And I started just as into a turnaround. So I was asked into a task force, and a couple weeks in, after the task force, I actually took my boss's job, which was responsible for a holding company, now responsible for 5 companies across 4 countries. And I was doing this in German, which I was not yet fluent in because I was living in Zurich, Switzerland. So if I thought that things didn't work before, or, they work until they don't, right? So it worked, but kind of got away with it, kind of didn't. I was like blown away, overwhelmed, because whatever I was doing clearly wasn't going to work in this context. And now here's where the learning came in. And the biggest lesson is I went into my boss's office again and I never thought of myself as a quitter. So when I think about this story, I'm like, oh my God, here I was just throwing it in a couple times. I went in, I was going in to quit. And I said, this isn't what I signed up for. Like, I really wasn't expecting this magnitude of work, and I was already burnt out, and I was coming for something a little easier. And I, told him some of the challenges I had, and he listened. He's such a great, great leader. And then he said to me, Penny, I hired you to make decisions, and what you do with the rest of your time is up to you.
Wow.
Now, at first, right now, I don't know how you take that, right? And there's wow, and there's wow, and then there's wow. So I went from the first one, like, wow, like how oversimplified, how ridiculous a statement, to a wow, that's super profound. And he was right. But, I always say that sometimes we're not in a place to hear like the coaching and the counseling. When we get great advice, sometimes we throw it away in the moment because we think that's not for us. Like, the yeah, but comes up. But when I thought about it, it was the biggest shift in my relationship with time, and the way that I work shifted. And as I said, I still have to practice it, but it made it a part of who I am. And what he was telling me was, this is the Pareto principle. This is the 80-20 rule. And this is how you live it, right? It's not just, yeah, I read about it. I know what it is. I understand it. This is how you live it. The decisions were the 20% for that role that were going to make 80% of the difference of me making impact and moving forward and moving my people forward in the role that I was in. And so I got it, that we have to live that Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, and constantly be seeking what's the 20% that's going to make 80% of the difference, to give us permission to have that hyper focus, to block out distractions, knowing that they're distractions, and letting go of the things that are less important. So it was a huge lesson for me. And I tell that story in all of my talks that I do, and people get it, right? Because we're all on the other side where I was in the beginning, where I'm just trying to outwork the work, and it's never gonna catch up.
That is super profound. And I can imagine, I mean, I experience a lot of that myself, even, just feeling like you just never gonna, you never have this feeling of like kind of getting on top of it. And so I love that, just that. And the other thing that I heard in your story too was that if there's a lesson that you're meant to learn, you can't run away from it. You were meant to learn that.
Yeah, it's totally true. I believe
So
that.
So how does a person, I mean, so that's a lot to unpack, I think, for a person who is letting their business or their life for that matter, their relationship, their career, because I think that could be applied to practically any
Anything.
aspect of
Yeah.
life. And so how does a person get to a place where you can just say, okay, I'm in this really like as entrepreneurs, as busy entrepreneurs, really, like how do you get out of that pattern of having to feel like you have to do it all and flipping that switch to like, what are the steps that a person would go through to become more of a decision maker in their business versus doing everything themselves?
Right. Well, so the very first thing in anything is awareness, right? Is that awareness that you're overwhelmed, that you're doing things that are suboptimal, that you're not focusing on the most important things, right? We once we get clear of how much we're distracted, and I do bring some heightened awareness with some tools and I have a free gift for everybody around getting some clarity around how distracted are you, what is distracting you, and that's from an emotional, a physical, and an environmental type of position. But we have to step back. We have to be aware of it, and we have to give ourselves space to step back. Stop filling every second of your time and give yourself space to step back. Schedule it in your calendar, an hour every week. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of time, but an hour to give yourself that space to step back and say, what's working and what's not working? Like
Mhm.
really simple questions can get you into that space of understanding, why is it that I feel overwhelmed? Where's my bottleneck? Why am I getting stuck? Or just that question of what's the 20% that's going to make the 80% of the difference? And where am I spending my time, right? Do a little analysis. A real quick look is, okay, here's the 20%. So why am I spending all of my time in this other area?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I think we try to overcomplicate things and, by feeling I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they feel guilty for not working. So you almost have to like create that nonstop busyness.
Yeah, I think it's true that we fight with different guiltiness in different types of areas, right? Guilty that we're not spending the time at home, guilty that we're not spending it on our business. It does leave us in this sort of like, you're screwed if you do and you're screwed if you don't, right?
Exactly. So where does that tug of war with time come from? Why do we have that?
Well, I did some research in the beginning of the pandemic about the tug of war because I was like, that's exactly it. And the definition of the tug of war is a struggle for control.
Mm, yes.
Right? Really notice how that just like it sunk in for a minute for you. It's a struggle for control. And that's exactly our problem is that we're all control freaks. And it's true. I mean, I'll say it to everybody out there, you're a control freak. But I'm just as much so. And I don't mean, you know, it's our emotional makeup is that it's difficult to allow things to unfold. That uncertainty, right, makes us want to plan, makes us want to control things that we can't control. So we try to control time, we try to control circumstances around us, and we exhaust ourselves trying to control the things that are outside of our control. And then it leaves us with learned helplessness for the things that we can control, like all of those distractions.
So the distractions are things that are in our control, and yet we run around trying to control things that we can't control. And that is crazy making.
Exactly. And that's why we're all crazy and we feel guilty and upset and overwhelmed, and is because we get caught up in that. So that's why we have to constantly step back and say, well, wait a second here. What is really within my control? And let's do something about that.
Exactly. So, so going back to this term, you wanted to define it a little bit more deep, which was the Focusologist or Focusologist.
Right.
Let's kind of dive into that a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's good timing for that. Because we do have the power to control and direct the energy of our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions to produce a positive, meaningful result. So that's the definition: is a person who practices controlling and directing the quality, the energy of our thought, our feelings, and our actions to produce a positive, meaning result. So, thinking of it like that is that when we're more aware of what's within our control and not within our control, right? That's one thing. And it's that relationship of our feelings, which direct sort of, our thoughts with, in my belief, that it's our thoughts, it's that question that we ask ourselves that drives how we feel, that also drives the actions that we take. And we try to like force change actions, like, hey, let's have and I think we discussed some of this in our interview as well, right? Is that somebody can have a great New Year's resolution that they're going to change the way that they behave, but we're forcing a behavior change when we're not getting to the root cause of the thoughts that are creating those feelings and those actions. So that's why it's all like encompassed in being that focusologist, is being aware of that relationship and what power we have to decide which is going to be most productive.
I love it. So being able to really manipulate the energy of our thoughts and direct that energy into how we feel, and how we feel is going to impact how we behave. And so say that an entrepreneur wants to grow their business, and they want to take it to the next level. And so what, and obviously they're too busy.
Right.
They feel, they have that sense that they're too busy. So walk us through like what a person in that situation that you were in,
Mm-hmm.
what would be like, how would they start to change their focus so that they, and I get that you mentioned it starts with awareness. So from there, what does one do?
Well, so they could be aware of the things they're saying to themselves. So are you constantly saying, I don't have the time? I can't do this. That's not possible, right? Is noticing what are the thoughts that are coming up that are the bottlenecks, that are creating that energy that keeps you from finding a solution. And so that's kind of where that comes up, is to recognize the things that you say. I was working with a CEO, and she was talking to her group, and she used the word hope like probably 30 times in her discussion. I hope that we're going to get to this level of achievement, and I hope that we can implement this project. And all she did was explain to the people that she didn't have the confidence that they were going to get there, right? So we have to really pay attention to the words that we're saying, because it reflects what's going on in our thoughts. And we might not be consciously aware of it. And that brings us to, oh, well, what does that mean, right? So record something that you might be saying in a meeting. If you're having a meeting with your team, record it and listen back and see what are the underlying unconscious messages that are going out from there. Those are a couple of different ways to take notice. I also believe that in any moment we ask ourselves, what does this mean? Like every single moment, it's just unconscious. So what answer did you give? So for me, I said that I was blaming other people and, recognizing these feelings and these behaviors. And I felt overwhelmed and, and I'd say like, nobody's accountable here. Why is no one accountable? So those things can open up when you go, okay, so what does that mean? Does it really mean that no one's accountable? That's the meaning that I gave it. Or could it mean that I'm a terrible micromanager and which is really the truth of what it was. If I looked back on it, I wasn't seeing how my behavior was impacting others. And if I were to change my behavior, it would impact and change their behavior. So those are ways to become aware of what's the bottleneck and what's holding you, where you're the bottleneck and where you're holding yourself back. Did that answer your question the way that you were looking?
Yeah, no, it definitely did. And I love that, so you noticed that, the word hope was brought up so many times. And that is such a word that has a tendency to signify doubt. And it's there's a few other words I might have you get into. But I also, I also kind of picked up on, it just sort of reminded me about how we can sabotage, like we might, micromanage people and be coming off and giving them these messages that are coming from maybe a place inside that is sabotaging your ability to succeed.
Right. Absolutely. And notice that it comes back to control. Micromanagement is all about control.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, it sends the message that you don't trust someone to do the job and to bring their creativity to it. And at the same time, somebody's not intentionally meaning to send that message. Like, I get it. I just, I had done it before. I felt like maybe, I could give some good advice on how to do it. I knew how I wanted it done, but I wasn't recognizing that really just letting go and letting them do it and putting some parameters around it would have been much more effective and really give and empower them.
Yeah. Now, how does a person, because I've been in situations and roles myself of hiring people, you kind of have to, when you're an entrepreneur and you're running a company. And, but if you've had people mess up, how do you balance out your thinking about, like, can I trust this person again? Or how can you make better hiring decisions in the future?
Well, so there are two different things, right? So if it was a bad hire, right, then you can look at the questions that you're asking people. I like to give everybody a test, like a challenge, let's go through a real scenario of something that you would put together. Let's say you're hiring a marketing person. Well, let's mock up a marketing plan and tell me how you would, mock one up. Here's the sample business. Doesn't have to be my business, right? A little scenario, mock it up. I'm looking for how they think and how they work it from the plan to the implementation, and give them a couple of challenges. Here's some things that came up. How would you deal with this? And give them like a real live case. That helps me to identify if somebody has that way of thinking that they can handle it on their own. But I think we also have to understand that people are going to make mistakes, that it's not necessarily a bad hire because they made a mistake, because if that's controlling, right? And that's part of that control is we can't say nobody's allowed to make a mistake here, because then you'll have no innovation and no one really pushing and bringing their best. So I would be able to know that wouldn't happen again by at least the same mistake is by sharing what we learned. and identifying, okay, what worked and what didn't work in this situation? What did we learn from it? How are we going to do things differently going forward as a result? And I think anytime you can learn a lesson, sometimes you're going to get a way better output the second or third time after you make a couple mistakes, and you may not have wanted the cost of those mistakes, but you may get a much, much better result because of them, because of all that you learned.
That's beautiful. I like how you articulated that people need to have an environment in which it's allowed to make mistakes. They're allowed to make mistakes, because without those mistakes, without the little mini failures, you can't have the innovation. So that was very beautiful. Well,
And
what
you
would
know what, one quick thing that I'd like to say in addition to that is then also you get people to really step into ownership. And that's really important because, you know, often there's a lot of transactional stuff going on in our businesses with us and the people that are working with us. And when we can step it up from a transactional relationship to one that they really own it, then you can feel really good in delegating to them in the future because you see how they own it and take it forward. So that's also a valuable lesson in that
when you say
relationship.
like transactional, you're talking about maybe hiring people to perform a very specific task. It's just task oriented.
Yes. Right. So that, you know, I don't have any buy-in to the outcome. I don't really own it. You just tell me this is what you want to do and I'll do it. Versus, and maybe doing it doesn't get the result, and you know it doesn't get the result, but why bother? You know, they told me to do it this and they told me to do it like this, so I'm going to do it like that.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So really getting people to, well, you know, I think, you know, you have to get people to, you have to be able to communicate your dream and get them emotionally invested in your dream. So they have not just a financial stake, but they also have some sort of value attached to that for themselves personally. I love
Yeah,
that.
like an emotional stake. Yeah.
Hmm. And I think an emotional stake is even more powerful for most people. I mean, probably, you know, when you go about hiring somebody, hearing that is not necessarily going to get them jazzed up about the job. But we all know underneath the surface, people ultimately, you know, they want to get something more something intangible that they get out of being able to play a role in helping you to grow.
Absolutely. I heard it was about 2 years ago, and there was a company that was at one of these college fairs, and they said that even though they were paying less, that they noticed that their lines were longer because they lead with their why, they lead with their purpose, and that more people wanted to work with them because they could immediately connect to, you know, to their heart, to a deeper meaning behind it. So I think that, you know, that really says a lot for what, especially the millennial generation, right, and the newer generations, what they want and what they're willing to sacrifice for it, willing to get paid a little bit less to be more connected through their heart.
Exactly. Beautiful. So moving back around to the whole area of focus and productivity, what would you say is the main thing that people get wrong about time management?
So the main thing that they get wrong is is we call it time management. And so we perpetuate this, and I don't know how to stop it, but we perpetuate it, that we continually shift people's focus to time, and time is finite. You know, there's 24 hours. We can't change that. And so when we try to control something we can't control, it creates stress. So we're just creating more stress for ourselves. When we focus on time, we're focused on scarcity. So we really want to be focused on the outcomes and the performance. So really should be, we're talking more about performance management or, you know, outcome management. And that's the problem, is that it's this perpetuated thing where it's got like this title that everybody knows it as time management, and immediately shifts us towards that transactional thinking, that scarcity, piece of it, and takes us away from, instead of taking a time frame, we see it as a stress and a constraint, for instance, instead of seeing it as a catalyst and a way to innovate, right? It's completely different if you're looking at, okay, I have half the time and I have to double the result. How am I going to do this? Right? Then you're looking to solve a problem. It becomes maybe something, interesting and exciting versus, being so focused on the other side of the time. Ooh, I only have X amount of time. That's impossible for me to do this in that time.
Yeah, no, it really made a lot of sense that it is coming from scarcity mentality to really be so focused on time, because it is the one, people don't think about this, but I mean, it's the one thing out of every other thing that you could possibly have that there is a limited supply of. Like there's an unlimited supply of everything else in the whole world except for time. Time is limited. And so, but people try to create more time or think they can create more time
Right.
when.
Well, we could also see it as fixed, right? As opposed to limited. I mean, it is limited in the sense, but we could also just see it as fixed. We can't change it. You can't manage it. So yeah, it's one of those weird things that we keep perpetuating.
Absolutely. So what does focus have to do with our mindset?
So, it's kind of another thing that most people think of focus as just the attention. And focus is so much more. So it's focus is really about the mindset. That's why in my definition, I use focusing on directing and controlling the energy of our thought, for instance, right? Imagine a mindset is all about the question that we ask and how easy it is to shift it. Like, oh, why does this happen to me? Right? Is a certain energy and a certain mindset and a certain focus. Because that's where then our attention goes. That's where what we're thinking about, how we're feeling, like I said, that relationship. And so when we shift the question that we might be asking or what we're saying to ourselves, it draws on a different energy and a different mindset. A different attitude will then come out of that, right? As to, wow, how can I achieve something different? So just a simple question can completely shift our focus and our attitude.
Great. Awesome. So you have a book that was an instant bestseller on Amazon, and I can definitely see why, because I think, the title, the productivity zone, I mean, everybody longs to get into that zone. So tell us a little bit about the productivity zone and your book.
Sure. Well, it's based off of sort of a framework to help people to step back, as we talked about earlier, and create that space to look at what's working and what's not working. And a very simple framework that it looks like a bell curve, but it's not. And in the center of the curve, we have the productivity zone, where 10 core drivers get us into the zone if we've fallen out. And they're based on categories. So there's some that are related to mindset. There's some that are related to strategy, and then others around sustainability. And it keeps us from what I call underfunctioning and overfunctioning, or we also know them as other names like perfectionism and procrastination. And so, it's basically that if we're not in the zone, then we've kicked ourselves into one of those areas, and those areas create stress for us. So it tells us, the book goes into taking a look at this framework, how we can use it. And then each chapter is based on one of those drivers that help us to get back into the zone.
Oh, I love it. And so if you're not in the zone, then you're either in the perfectionism or you're in distraction. You're in one of those two places.
Yep.
And then
in a way, perfectionism is also a distraction, right? So either side are a distraction, because if you're over analyzing something, you're also distracted from moving forward because you're over functioning. So either overfunctioning or underfunctioning can act as a distraction.
That's brilliant. That really makes a lot of sense, because I think perfectionism kind of is a distraction when we are striving. It's like there's some reason. What would you say is the main reason that people feel like, the need to step into that perfectionism?
Control, bring it back to the control freaks, right? Is we feel like we need to control it.
That's so true. You're trying to control the outcome, really. Like people that are not launching their business or not launching their product, or, because it's like they've got to tweak this and they got to tweak that. They're really trying to control the outcome.
And of course it comes from fear, right? Of judgment or of failure, or right. It can come from those types of things, but there's an element of control in there as well. That is what drives us to that behavior.
Yeah. Well, we feel like maybe we can control the response, the reactions that we're going to get from other people. The more we try to tweak it and make it perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. If I just do a little bit more, right, then I'll be able to control the outcome. Like you said, I'll be able to control how people feel about it and so forth.
Awesome. Well, if you really want to own your focus, then I would highly recommend that you check out this distraction quiz. Can you talk a little bit about the distraction quiz and what that's going to do for our audience?
Well, it'll help you find out what your distraction profile is. So you'll see if you're a wizard or a hamster, squirrel, a deer in the headlights, right? Just a kind of fun way, or maybe even a time zombie, fun way to kind of, you'll be asked a series of questions that ask you about emotional distractions, about physical distractions, about environmental distractions. So kind of breaking them down so we know more specifically what's distracting us. And the more that we understand the specifics, the better that we're able to own them, right? We seem to want to own our actions, but we also need to own our distractions as well. So to just create that heightened awareness as to where you are and what are some of the things that you might not have realized might be actually acting as a distraction.
Interesting. And I just picked up on action is part of distraction.
Yeah.
It's just an action that's not taking you closer to your result.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's true.
So you can take that quiz on your website, pennyzenker360.com/DQ. In other words, DQ for distraction quiz /podcast. And we'll have that link available for people to easily click through in our show notes. And so I hope that our audience will go. I hope. Listen to me. I should
go to distraction quiz. You need this. You need to know.
Yes. I know that our audience is going to gain a lot of value when they go and check out this quiz and find out what kind of distractions have been, what kind of distractor you are, and help you to turn that around and get you to be more productive and stop feeling the need to control, and ultimately live in more focus and become a focusologist like yourself. So, well, thank you so much for being a guest on Power of Your Mind podcast. Is there anything else that you'd like to close out the show with and tell our listeners before we say goodbye?
Well, I would love it if they would also check out my TEDx. I'm anxiously looking to hit the 1 million mark before the end of this year. So I would greatly appreciate the support to check out. It'll also be support what we were talking about here, and make a comment there and let me know that that all the comments help more people to see it, and then I'll hit the 1 million mark and we can all celebrate together.
That will be amazing. And I totally see that happening. And so I invite the guests to definitely, that'll be a link that we'll also have in the show notes so they can easily click over to your TEDx and get some more amazing value from you over there. I'm sure that the talk was amazing and our guests will get amazing value. And I can definitely see you hitting your million mark on that. So thank you very much for sharing that. And thank you again so much for being a guest on our show.
Thanks for having me.